Chris recently stepped down after his 12-year run at Wired to lead 3D Robotics as the CEO. He's written 2 groundbreaking best-selling books, The Long Tail and Free, and his newest book, Makers, which just came out in the fall, The New Industrial Revolution, really explains how technologies such as 3D printing and electronic assembly are really becoming availably cheaper and easier for everyone to access. Chris is the founder of DIY Drones and 3D Robotics, a robotic manufacturing company. He worked at The Economist for 7 years in London, in Hong Kong, and in New York. He also served as an editor of two top science journals. In physics from George Washington University, where he started his bachelor's degree at age 27. We are fortunate to have Chris here today with us, and please join me in welcoming Chris Anderson.
Thank you. I feel slightly over-mic'd here. I need to explain why I didn't go to college until I was 27, and the answer is I failed out of high school, I failed out of college, I worked as a bicycle messenger for about 5 years, played in punk rock bands. All recommended, by the way, so if any of you have children who are kind of like struggling a little bit in school, be patient. It tends to work out pretty well in the end. Important learning experience. So what I'd like to talk about today is what I think is perhaps the most exciting time to be a small business in America. As Bethany just said, I just recently quit my job to run what was originally a small business, is now not so small anymore, in robotics. And why now? Why did I pick this opportunity to do it, and do it in the United States? And the answer is that the set of technologies out there, some of them you know a lot about, like the web, and others that are just newer, new manufacturing technologies, have allowed us to create real businesses making physical stuff in the United States in a way we've never been able to before. 3 years ago, I was messing around with my kids doing projects. Now I'm running a multi-million-dollar robotics company. I learned how to build a factory basically online with my co-founder, and that's the miracle of this age. I'm going to walk a little bit through what's going on, but let's just start with a little bit of my own story. One of these buttons is going to work, right? No. Does anyone have a remote that works? Or can you manually advance the slides? This doesn't do anything. No. Thank you. If you could just manually. Perfect. Okay. So this is my story. This is my grandfather, Fred Hauser, Swiss immigrant to Los Angeles in the 1930s. And he worked by day, he worked in Hollywood. It's a mechanical business. And he worked on tape loops. Next slide, please. Okay, I guess I'll just... Oh, thank you. Thank you. This is what he invented. He invented the automatic sprinkler system, which is basically what a Swiss engineer would invent if you put him in Los Angeles. It's you take a sprinkler system and you put a watch on top of it, a clock. And then you get an automatic sprinkler system. Next slide, please. This is sort of the best and the worst thing about invention in the 20th century. What's great about it is that he was able to patent and license. What was bad about it is that he had to patent and license. The only way to get a product into market was to license it to a manufacturer who could then make it. Next slide, please. No, thanks. These aren't doing anything. Okay, wrong. Yeah. Okay, so this is the way it eventually came out. It was the Moody Rainmaster, and as you can see, it allowed you to have your lawn would sprinkle itself while you were at the beach. That was terrific, very exciting. And this is the way I spent my summers. I spent my summers learning how to invent things with my grandfather. The workbench is mechanical drawing, and then as I was older, we learned how to machine stuff, how to use metal lathes and all that. And then I forgot about it for 30 years. And the question is, why did I forget about it for 30 years? And the answer is, it was too hard. Back then, if you had an idea, step one was to create a prototype. You need to be a machinist. You need to be able to use a metal lathe and bandsaws and all this kind of stuff to make something real. And then step two was to patent and license. a tiny fraction of people with ideas had the skills and the luck to complete that chain. My grandfather did, but there was very little chance that I could as well. So there's a movie that came out a few years ago called Flash of Genius about the invention of the intermittent windshield wiper. And this is the same story as my grandfather, but it ends tragically. What happened here was that rather than patent and licensed, he patented and he decided to build his own factory. And this is a picture from the movie of him in the basement, with his children, inventing this intermittent windshield wiper that pauses. And then the movie goes into the 5-year process necessary to create a factory. He, rents some space, hires some people, brings in manufacturing equipment, etc. And 61, 62, 63, 64, still not done. In the movie, he walks out of the factory, unfinished, in the rain, by himself, turns the corner, and the new 1965 Ford Mustangs are coming around the corner to be unveiled, and the windshield wipers are pausing. And he realizes his idea has been stolen, he's ruined, and he goes mad. And the whole movie follows his descent into insanity. And that was the lesson. Don't try to go into manufacturing in America in the 20th century because it's too hard. It's too expensive, it's not for you. And we saw a generation go away, move to Asia. Manufacturing was lost, or at least many of the jobs were lost in the United States because it was too hard. Today, this is what manufacturing looks like. This is Tech Shop in San Mateo, in the Bay Area. And this is like a gym for manufacturing. And here, for $100 a month, or whatever, I think $110 a month, you can get access to all the tools you need. All the tools my grandfather had, all the tools that the biggest factories had, all the tools that you need to take an idea and make it real. 3D printers, CNC machines, laser cutters, traditional manufacturing, all the software tools, the training, etc. When you go to a gym, you get access to machines that you wouldn't otherwise want in your house or could afford, and you get trainers and you get other people working on things around you. Now you can do the same thing for manufacturing. You go to one of these and they're spreading around the country, and you have the ability to make your ideas real. This wasn't possible 10 years ago, and now here's an example of how many there are. This is just a map of the so-called maker spaces or hacker spaces that are spreading around the world. These things are now becoming accessible. This is the kind of stuff that anybody can do now. So this is so the lesson here is that hard stuff is getting easy. The barriers to entry to manufacturing are falling. We've all become designers. I wanted to show you a little bit back in my own history. So I told you that my grandfather invented the the automatic sprinkler system. And I thought, well, what would Grandpa do today? And the answer is, he would build it along the web's lines. It would be open source, it would be Arduino based, it would be connected to the web, and so I just did it. Now, ironically enough, I don't actually have a lawn, and I have no need for a sprinkler, but Grandpa did sprinklers, so sprinklers it must be. So I went online, found some people, and we built this thing here, which was Open Sprinkler. And it's exactly what you would imagine. It's an Internet of Things sprinkler. You can control it with your smartphone, with a tablet. You can plug in any sensors you want. It's wireless. It's built on Arduino, so it's open. And it's pretty cool. And it actually does things that commercial sprinklers don't do, and you don't have to pay a monthly service fee and all this kind of stuff. Now, it's not going to change the world. As a matter of fact, it turns out the biggest customer for Open Sprinkler is hydroponic pot growers, who turn out to have very, very intense sprinkling needs. Who knew? But the point is that I could do it. The point is that in a matter of 6 weeks, I could go from I should reinvent the sprinkler system for the 21st century to coming out with a prototype to now you can buy it today for like $70. And I did this with friends, online, for free. That's the difference between then and now. So when I was doing it, one of the things I learned how to use was CAD. Now CAD, computer-aided design, is one of those things that used to be super hard. The software tools like Autodesk cost like $6,000 a seat. You needed like a college, a degree in design or industrial design to use it. Super complex. Now it's basically free. You can download free software. This is Autodesk 123D. There's Tinkercad on the web. And you can use it yourself. So this is me designing the enclosure for the sprinkler system. And I'd never used CAD before. Now, this took me about 3 minutes to do. And the reason I'm pointing out is that I wanted to show you something in particular that's kind of interesting. You know, on your word processor, you go to the file menu and you pick print. And when you pick print, this kind of amazing thing happens that you never think about, which is that pixels on the screen turn into atoms on the page, atoms of ink. These CAD programs do something similar, but they don't have print, they have make. And so if you look up there in that menu, you pick make it. And so I've just taken an idea and put it on screen like a word processor, and then I pick make, and then it walks me through about 300 years of industrial technology. It walks me through what material choices I want. Do I want to output it on a laser cutter or 2D, or a 3D printer in 3D? Do I, what are the volume consequences? What's it going to cost to make it? What if I did it in metal? What if I did it in plastic? These are all aspects that used to require like professionals to walk you through, and now it's a point-and-click experience. That basically, manufacturing skills have been turned into a software wizard, and it's free. So, my children grow up with a 3D printer, and maybe some of you do as well. Let's do a quick show of hands. Who here has seen a 3D printer work? Good. Who here owns a 3D printer? Oh, a couple, one or two. Good. And the gentleman over here who owns a 3D printer, do you have children? Okay, so nobody here yet has a 3D printer and children. Well, next Christmas, next holiday system, if you have children, my message to you is it's time. Remember how your parents got a home computer? They weren't sure why, they weren't sure what it was for, maybe you could program it, but basically that's why you're here today. Your parents recognized that a home computer was basically going to train you on a 21st century skill, and that's what you learned. Well, so my children have a 3D printer, it's a MakerBot, and this is what my daughters do. My daughters play The Sims, a video game, which is kind of basically a dollhouse on screen. And then when their video game time is over, we say it's time to play with the real dollhouse. And they're like, our real dollhouse is not as cool as our virtual dollhouse. Can you buy me some new furniture? And the answer is, I know the answer is no, but I have to kind of get to know. And so we go online and we find out that dollhouse furniture is crazy expensive. It's like $30 per set. It's like very limited choice, and it's all the wrong size. Turns out there's no standard size of dollhouses and dollhouse characters. You can't really tell whether it's the right size till you get it, and it's like $30 a set, and it's just a guaranteed disappointment. But we have a 3D printer, so we don't have to do that. So what we do is we go to Thingiverse, which is a free repository of online designs, and we download designs for furniture. Now these designs are put there by a woman who goes by the name of Pretty Small Things, and by day, she's a set designer on Broadway for theater. And the way they design sets is that they 3D model them, and they create little model sets first to see how it feels. Then if it's good, then they get the set makers to make the real thing. So once she makes a set, she then just uploads the designs to Thingiverse to give away for free, because why not? My daughters then download this furniture, which was designed originally for a play on Broadway, and they just scale it so it's just the right size for their dollhouse, and then they print it out, and then they paint it, and they love it. And if you're a toy company out there, this should fill you with terror, right? Because my children don't need to buy toys in the store anymore. They can make their own. And when they make something, they infuse something of themselves in it. It's not just not consumers, they're also creators, they're participants. They infuse some of their own creativity into it, and when they're done with these chairs, they don't put them on in the dollhouse, they put them on their windowsill, because they're so proud of what they made. And their relationship with their toys and their relationship with plastic has gone from disposable to something they treasure, simply by giving them the opportunity to modify it a little bit in the course of making it. And my boys, meanwhile, of course, make Warhammer 40K mechs, and then paint those as well. And these are low resolution, and they have to paint them, they don't come out in colors. But the next generation will be higher resolution, and it'll be multicolor. And the next generation after that will have different metals and plastics. And then it's going to bring the electronics, and you can be able to print the wires in it as well. And you can start to see where this goes. Right now we're kind of in the dot matrix era of 3D printers, but we're moving to the laser printer, to the inkjet, and to ultimately what could approach manufacturing quality. Now you're not going to make a million this way, but you could start to make one that's just right for you. That's a huge difference when you look at the relationship we have between us and the stuff we buy, us and the stuff we consume, the stuff we make, the stuff we customize, the stuff that we that we sort of, on demand create on our desktop is something that we value more than the stuff we consume, the one-size-fits-all stuff that we buy for mass production. So I wanted to end with this one slide. You know the Apple, when Apple came out with the iPad, their slogan was "Rip, Mix, Burn." And we don't think much about this, but it was kind of amazing at the time. Think of that, rip, mix, burn, rip. Take a commercial product and make it your own. Bring it into your computer. Mix it. Change it. Burn it. You're manufacturing your own music. You have the ability to make a CD. So that was like 10 years ago. Now Autodesk's slogan is rip, mod, make. What does that mean? How do you rip? I know how to rip music. How do you rip things? And the answer is, it's called reality capture or 3D scanning. And you can download an app right now on your iPhone or iPad called 123D Catch, which allows you to take a camera of the device and just go click, 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 click around something. You can see those are pictures taken of her. And then it uploads those pictures to the cloud and creates a polygonal mesh, a three-dimensional design, which you can then 3D print and make a Pez dispenser of your head if that's what you want. But just think about this. Rip, mod, that means capture reality, capture things, photocopy things, bring them into your computer, change them, and then make them the way you want. That means we can photocopy stuff. Anything around here, today I can take it on my phone and I can photocopy it and I can print it. Now it won't be as good. It won't have all the internal qualities, but I can start to duplicate it. I can do a coffee cup right now. I can photocopy a coffee cup, and if the coffee cup started ceramic and white, I'll bring it out in titanium with my name on it. And that doesn't seem like a big idea, doesn't seem like it's going to change the world, but we basically put the tools of production in the hands of everybody. Today it's low resolution, today it's limited materials, but it's getting faster, better than printing ever did. So this is the beginning of what I think is a new industrial revolution. What we now have is the ability for, remember my grandfather, he had two steps. One is he took idea and turned it into prototype. All of you can do that now. These are free tools, my children can do it, anybody can do it. The next step was to go from prototype to mass production. And that next step is getting easier as well because the world's factories are now on the web. We call this cloud manufacturing. And that same file that you created on your screen and printed on your local printer, you can upload to these factories to be produced at any level. Remember that menu item where it said make it? You can type in how many you want. And you can make 1 million if you want. Now, I wouldn't suggest doing it with a software wizard. You might want to make a phone call and make sure that that's really what you want. But fundamentally, the gap between idea and entrepreneurship is now shrinking to the point that it's something you can do in an evening. You can become a manufacturing company in an evening by just clicking on the right things. If you have an idea, all those other things, the prototyping and the manufacturing, no longer stand in the way. We saw what happened when we did this with computing. 1977, the personal computer. We saw what happens when we did this with communications with 1993 and the web. Now we're seeing the same thing happening with manufacturing. The era of personal manufacturing, of desktop manufacturing has arrived, and what you're seeing around here today, created by big companies, increasingly these are going to be created by little companies, by startups, by entrepreneurs, by individuals. The same way that those people created the modern web, those people are going to create the modern manufacturing industry. So that, if you're on Kickstarter, if you're on Etsy, if you're on Quirky, you've seen this happen already. I see Pebble smartwatch had their press announcement today at CES. They came out of the maker movement. The fact that 4 guys in Palo Alto can compete with Sony is exactly what I'm talking about. This is an exciting moment. Manufacturing is the biggest industry out there. I think we're at the dawn of a new era. Thank you very much. So I think we have time for some questions. I'm not quite sure how we want to handle the microphone. We have microphones around? Yep, we have microphones around. Just put up your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you. Yes, right here. The microphone's coming to you.
The websites that you recommended.
Yeah.
Could you say those again? I didn't write them
Absolutely. Okay, the question was the websites that I recommend. So if you want to experiment with this, number 1, start with Tinkercad. That's TINKERCAD.com, tinkercad.com. And it's a free web-based CAD program. It's as easy to use as Minecraft. The next thing you do is you're going to go to Shapeways. So let's say you don't own a 3D printer. You don't need a 3D printer. You can use have a service do it for you. So in the same way that Shutterfly would print your photos, Shapeways will 3D print the material, your design. So then go to Shapeways, and whatever you design on Tinkercad, have it made on Shapeways. And just for the hell of it, have it made in silver. You know, it might cost you about 30 bucks, but have it made in silver because it's absolutely beautiful. Or stainless steel, they're both cool. The next thing you do you have an iPhone or an iPad? iPhone, okay. Download a couple apps. Start with 123D Catch, which is the reality capture, the 3D scanning app. And that'll allow you to use your camera to do it. Then download 123D Design, which again will allow you to do that kind of CAD thing on your phone. And then 123D Make, which will allow you to turn your designs into these two-dimensional slices, which you can laser print and out of cardboard. And it's really fun thing to do. It kind of assembles it for you. The last thing, if you're really excited about this and you love what you designed and you want to get it mass-produced, check out sites like Alibaba.com or MFG.com, and those are kind of interfaces to the world's factories. And they'll take your file and they'll mass-produce them in the millions if that's what you want. Yes, sir, over here.
Yeah, I'm just curious, your presentation here, are you going to have that available on the web?
I think it's going to be available on the open website. My colleagues here? Yeah. It'll be available on openforum.com. Any other questions? Yes, sir, over here.
Hi. Sorry, is that too loud? I guess I was just wondering, because I know, like in your book and in the talk that you were just giving, you use a lot of these concepts, like something like the Industrial Revolution,
yeah.
Or I know like another big word for tech companies is often like something like disruption of a particular industry or particular business model. And I guess I sort of wonder, like, those seem theoretically like kind of violent concepts to me, and I think something that, you know, came about from the Industrial Revolution was Marx's whole theory, which was never really clear if he said that, you know, the revolution that was going to come was going to be a natural, peaceful process or a more, you know, chaotic one. And I think about this with examples like, you know, things that Wired even covered while you were still working there, of defense distributed and 3D printing of firearms and things like that. How do you kind of see that fitting in with the whole maker movement?
Yeah, great questions. You're basically asking sort of two questions. One, the sort of industrial disruption, maybe the other one being a social disruption element. So the Industrial Revolution, if you think about it, nothing in history changed human behavior, the human condition more than the Industrial Revolution. Actually, don't have a slide here, but basically, if you look at population, global population, it was basically flat forever until about 1800 or 1840, in which case, at what point it went straight up. The Industrial Revolution, over a course of about 100 years, the Industrial Revolution doubled the lifespan of people in the United Kingdom, quadrupled the population of the United Kingdom, and basically created the modern world. The way it did it is by replacing muscle power with brain power. We went from basically beasts of burden to letting the machines do the hard work, and we can start to use our head. And it moved people from the farm to the city. Now, we originally, in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, moving to the city meant dark satanic mills and all this, but what it eventually did very quickly is create the modern infrastructure of healthy living. So, you know, we think of being the farmlands as being bucolic and lovely, but in fact, the walls were damp, you had no access to clean water, there was no particular health care, education was hard to find, and lifespan was quite low. About 100 years into the Industrial Revolution, as we built these industrial cities in Manchester and Birmingham and elsewhere, we started to create the infrastructure necessary to improve quality of life. So, for example, we went from sort of maybe, you know, peat or wooden walls to brick walls, and they became drier. We created modern sewage systems, running water. We got proper educational systems. We got proper healthcare systems. And that's fundamentally the concentration of people allowed us to create this infrastructure that allowed us to kind of evolve as a species. So it was disruptive initially, you know, the Luddites subjected to the destruction of the initial cottage industries, which was basically piecework, by replacing them with machines. But very quickly, it created a new class of profession, the more intellectual ones. And as actually Britain, you know, Britain was the world's textile leader, even though it didn't have any cotton production of its own. The simple power of those machines allowed them to take cotton from Egypt or the New World and use the machines and the design skills of the British artisans to become a global power. So that was incredibly disruptive to the old way of living, but it created a much longer living, healthier, larger population in the modern world. Today, then we saw the second industrial revolution. Let's call that the digital revolution, and that once again replaced our mind power with replaced our calculating with machine calculating, and allowed us to kind of move up to higher levels of knowledge. So we kind of we outsourced much of our brains, much more powerful systems. In this case, the computer and then the internet. So that once again elevated us to another level where we could do more creative acts. The third industrial revolution is just the combination of the two. You combine computers with the manufacturing, but we've of course had digital manufacturing for decades. What's new is the really important element, which is the democratization. What was powerful about the digital revolution was not the creation of the computer, but the personal computer. It wasn't the creation of the internet, but it was the access of everybody to the internet. That democratization, that sort of giving powerful tools to regular people is how they changed the world. And although we've had digital manufacturing for 40 years, the democratization of digital manufacturing is only happening right now. So the answer is, what's it going to do? Well, we saw what the web did to media, for example. It didn't kill media, YouTube didn't kill Hollywood, but it created an alternative to media that I would argue incredibly enriched our culture, brought more people into the creative process, and redefined what media could be. I wrote my first book, The Long Tail, was probably about that. Imagine the long tail stuff. Imagine that micro manufacturing can now compete with mass production. Imagine the products that would sell in 10,000. Right now, it's very hard to create a product that will sell in 10,000. Because mass production doesn't get out of bed for less than 1 million, and individual inventors cannot make that many. We've now created the ability to create 10,000 of something. And many of those 10,000s will remain niche and never get beyond 10,000, but some of those 10,000s will be the next 10 million. So the market of 10,000 is kind of where the Pebble Watch is right now. And that was only possible because these new tools got out there, and it didn't come from Sony. So, and most of the web today is sort of built around the markets of 10,000 model, where these niches flourish. The internet doesn't discriminate between the niche and the mass. These niches flourish, some of them redefine culture and who we are and what we want. That hasn't been possible with physical stuff until now, but if the internet is a precursor, I think that long tail stuff, the explosion of choice and creativity that happened over the last 20 years online is going to happen in the physical world as well. Thank you.
Hi, Manu.
Hi.
Just wanted to say that I quit my corporate job 2 weeks back, inspired by 3D printing. So I'm here to look at 3D printing technology and set up a 3D printing business back home in India. So that's where I am. My question really is, as far as consumer printers are concerned, where do you see it going in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years, and what do you see it capable of doing?
Great question. Basically, where are 3D printers, where are they going? So let me just take a moment and explain what a 3D printer is for those of you who may not know it. So a 2D printer, the one you have on your desktop right now, takes pixels on the screen and puts them into a layer of ink on a page, toner, inkjet, or whatever. A 3D printer does the same thing, but it builds it up in layers. It's just one 2D layer after another, and either in plastic or starch or metals or something like that, and over time, out comes a physical object. Now today, the one I have at home uses plastic. It's something called ABS, which is like Lego, and it's pretty low resolution. The next one I've got coming is much higher resolution. It's going to look, at this distance, it would look about like this, and it has 2 colors. So in other words, I can pretty much do this. Now, it won't work, because I can't do the electronics inside yet, but it's going to pretty much look like this. And the generation after that will bring in more materials. Now maybe some of the wires in here, I'll be able to print those as well. And maybe some of the mechanical elements, the buttons and such. It could be functional. Now I'm not printing semiconductors yet, but I can start to print more and more of them. Now, I don't think it's going to take as long as it took us to get the modern inkjet. It took us, let's say, 20 years to get from dot matrix to inkjet. And the reason I don't think it's going to take as long is because the 3D printer is basically built on a 2D printer chassis. All the same technology. It's basically got one more dimension. A 2D printer does this, and a 3D printer does this and this. So you add sort of basically one more stepper motor to the existing Hewlett-Packard or Epson or Canon, what you've already got, and now you've got a 3D printer. And so that inkjet technology, rather than squirting ink, imagine if it were squirting, plastic, or if it were squirting maybe some kind of, resin, something that could harden into metal. Now, so I think that, at a certain point you're up against physical properties. Today's mostly use extrusion. Now, the next generation uses something called digital light projection with these like projector chips that does an entire layer at once. But you're up against sort of the materials you can have in your home. The science fiction version of this is the matter compiler, where you start with this kind of bath of like goo, and it can join atoms, it can assemble atoms in anything. Now, we actually have something that can do that right now. It's called nature. Right, so nature is a matter compiler. Nature basically takes, plants, take minerals out of the ground and sunlight and some water and compile a plant. So we know it can be done, but it's not easy. But I think the simple answer is you're going to be able to get sort of production quality surfaces and shapes and sort of resolution within 5 years. You're going to have the electronics within about 7 years. I think in around 10 years you're going to start bringing in multi-materials, including metals, at home. 20 years from now, it could be DNA. You could be 3D printing vaccines. And just think about it. Right now, when you went to the doctor to get your flu vaccine, they guessed at what the flu is going to be this year. They don't have any idea. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. What if your doctor could send you an email saying, the flu that's coming around this week is, H23467, whatever. Here's an encrypted email. Send it to your little DNA synthesis or RNA synthesis machine, and out comes a custom vaccine, a little sort of thimble full of goo that you put in your orange juice, and pow, you've got a vaccine on demand. Now, we know that's possible. DNA synthesis and DNA sequencing is getting to the desktop level right now. We haven't made it quite as simple as an encrypted email, and I need this to say, especially to the gentleman's other point, once you're printing DNA on your desktop, the question like what could possibly go wrong, starts to come up, and we have to worry a little bit about that. But that is technically possible within, I would say, decade and a half. Thank you. Back. Question over here.
I have a question. How do you feel that graphene will interact with the rest of the
Graphene?
You talk about the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
Graphene, and we think about the 3D printer. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But graphene is even 10 times more awesome.
Right. This gentleman's asking about graphene, which is basically like carbon nanotubes and things like that. I don't know. I'm not enough of an expert on graphene. What do you think? Give him back the mic, please.
Oh, I think that it's going to be 200 times stronger than steel.
Yeah.
It'll conduct electricity faster, 1,000 times more than copper, and it melts at 3,500 degrees. You could dump it into steel and have a 2x4 that'd be as strong as a girder and lightweight.
There you go. Okay, so you've just basically figured out what the ink cartridges of the 3D printer are going to be full of. They're going to be full of graphene. So I'm sure the business in selling graphene full cartridges is going to be a great one in the future. The HP of the next generation. Thank you for that. I think you had a question over here. No? Oh, okay. Yes, thank you. Over here.
Hello, I'm Geneviève. I'm a French journalist. I want to know what is the major trend for CES this year, according to you? And the second point is, why do I have to get the Amex card to have your book?
So I have a hard time saying what the major trends of CES. What I'm looking at most closely is the sort of the Internet of Things, which is to say that here's basically why I quit my job and ran a robotics company. Because what's going on in smartphones is not about the phones; it's about the components inside the phones. The Moore's law has never moved faster than it's moving inside the iPhones and the Androids right now. It's the MEMS sensors, the GPS, the cameras, the ARM processors, the wireless modules, the memory. When you actually track the sort of performance, the price-performance curve with all of these technologies, they've never moved faster than they're moving right now, thanks to the smartphone revolution. And what's cool is that these components have application outside of smartphones. So I think earlier it was mentioned that my company makes drones. make flying robots. A drone is just a smartphone with wings. It's the same technology, we use the same sensors. 10 years ago, it was impossible. A gyro was like this big and cost $10,000 and was export controlled. Now you have, in the phone in your pocket, with the right app, you can fly a 747. That's an amazing thing, and these technologies have incredible application outside. So when you look at the Internet of Things, it's just using smartphone technologies outside of smartphones. Sensors, wireless, connectivity, processing, memory, and the fact that the economies of scale of the Apples and the Googles of the world are bringing the price down so quickly means that you can basically have, smart dust. That, everything, we've talked a lot about everything around you being smart and aware and internet connected, but it wasn't possible until the smartphone revolution made it so. So that's what I'm following most closely. And your second question was, forgive me.
Why should I have the Amex card to get your book free?
First of all, you should have an Amex card because it's awesome, and I have two. So, second of all, you want to know why? You want to know how to get the book free other than Amex card? I don't know. I can't think of any way. I might have an extra one somewhere. I don't know. Come see me. We'll find a way. All right. Any other questions? Yes, over here.
Can you tell us about your plans with 3D Robotics?
Yeah, 3D Robotics. Thank you. 3D Robotics is now actually 3 years old, so the company has existed for some time. I just took over to run it as CEO a month ago. We raised a $5 million venture capital round. We have now about 50 employees, 2 factories, one in San Diego, one in Tijuana. And we're basically going to do that pivot that many of the maker movement companies are doing from kind of serving hobbyists and the DIY crowd to something that's more like this. That just works out of the box, and that pivot from sort of a bag of parts to a well-designed, object that you just plug in and does its thing in robotics is not trivial. It requires a lot of systems integration, software design, and just production efficiencies, and basically going from the Apple II to the Macintosh. It's kind of, not to be too grandiose, but that's kind of the migration that we have to go through right now. I think you saw the 3D printer companies like MakerBot do the same thing. My first MakerBot was a bag of parts. I screwed it together, I messed it up, it never worked. MakerBot today looks like a microwave oven. You just plug it in and it works. Robotics has not been like that until so far. Robotics has been hard, unless it's a vacuum cleaner. But aerial robotics is really quite complex, and our job is to make it simple. That's what we're doing. Last question. I'll take this one here.
To the point of the French journalist, why should she get the book for free? What happens with intellectual property rights?
Yeah, good question. So my last book was called Free, and we gave it away free. The book, by the way, the subtitle should have been Free Me Up. So it's about you giving away something free to get something else, to sell something else at more value. So you give away something to the majority as a form of marketing, and then the minority who want more, you have something more to sell them. When we're talking about this kind of stuff, the intellectual property rights, I'll give you an example. So in our robotics company, we're an open source robotics company. We give away all of our intellectual property. We give away the designs of the boards, we give away the software, we give away the documentation. And if you want to just take our designs and make your own, more power to you, go for it. However, most people don't want to do that. Most people would like us to make it for them. And so what we do is we say, 99.9% of people will, even though we give away the design files, they'll pay us to make it for them because we reduce the risk in doing so. So I think free is an incredibly great way to build communities, to encourage participation, to allow people to experiment and sort of sample the product, but then ultimately it has to be matched with paid. So I think intellectual property is going to be very challenged. In this new world, we know what digital music did to the music industry. We know what digital copying did to the print industries, like newspapers. We've seen cases of what digital copying can do to film industries. Those are all covered by copyright. Physical objects are not copyright. You can't copyright this. You can trademark it. You can have trade secrets. You can have patents, but you can't copyright this. So if I do that sort of rip, mod, make of this, how many polygons was copyright infringement? You know, I mean, it's not even the right, it's not an answerable
I
question.
mean, generally ideas.
Ideas.
I mean, generally it's a question of protecting one's ideas.
Right.
If you choose to give it away, fine. But what
Right.
if you choose not to?
So the question was, if you choose not to give away your ideas, how do you protect them? My grandfather patented, and that was the way it was done. But those patents were a huge barrier. They were expensive, took forever. You lost control. Today's a choice. You can always protect your ideas. Just keep them secret. Don't tell anybody. I would encourage you not to do that, because the advantage of giving your ideas away is you get back more in return. I mean, there's a reason why this forum is called open. It's because openness creates these network effects by which you can build communities, by which you can find people to participate who you never would have found on your own. In our own community of drones, I knew nothing about this. I just put out and shared my ignorance, said I know nothing. You know, anybody else know anything? People started contributing. They started sharing code. They started sharing design files. Today, we have many of our designers, many of our developers. By day, they work for Google and Apple and IBM and Microsoft. By night, they work for our community, building something together. We could never have hired them. We couldn't afford them. They wouldn't have quit their jobs to work for us. But by creating an open innovation platform, that allowed them to follow their passion and to scratch their own itch and to do something that they really wanted to do above and beyond their day job, they ended up creating something that the world as a whole can benefit from. So for us, open works. And I'm not being philosophical, I'm being pragmatic. When I give away my stuff, I get back more in return. But for others, it doesn't. And I think today, it's a choice, whereas for my grandfather, it wasn't. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's great to have you here. It sounds like it's such an exciting time for small businesses as the barriers to entry are really being broken down.